Welcome back, everybody. This is Nicole from Wildflower Valley Farm, and I wanted to do just a quick update before I get started with the rest of today's video and show you the babies that were born here on Monday. Today is Wednesday, so they're just 2 days old. This mama doe had 6 gorgeously healthy fat babies. They are beautiful. And she is doing well feeding them. She's a good mama. So I'm in the rabbit barn today because I am going to start the first of a series of videos that I'm going to be doing for you all on how to take care of rabbits, just backyard rabbits. The information that I'm going to share will be applicable to meat rabbits, show rabbits, pet rabbits, any rabbits that you might be raising as small livestock in your backyard. So let's get started. The topic of this first video is on housing. As you can see, the housing setup that I have for my rabbits is in primarily wire cages. These particular cages are hand built, but you can buy cages from places like Tractor Supply. If you live in Tennessee, some of the Tennessee farmers co-ops have pre-made rabbit cages. Some of them are already assembled, some of them are not. A lot of your online farm supply stores also have wire cages. Most of your online stores ship them flat with instructions on how to assemble them once they get to you. But the wire bottom cages are what work best for me here on our farm. So that's what I have. I want to talk about some other options that may be available to you or may work better for your farm. And I'll show you a little more detail about my rabbit tractor. I know I've done some videos on that before, but I'll show you a little more detail on that in a few minutes. But the primary thing you want to look for if you're going to do rabbits in wire cages is space. You want to make sure your cages are tall enough, wide enough, deep enough, large enough for the rabbits that you're going to be keeping in them. Depending on the size of the rabbit, the minimum size cage that you would want to have would be 18 inches by 24 inches by 18 inches tall. For most of your smaller type breed rabbits, like maybe your Holland Lops, your Mini Rexes, some of your other smaller rabbits, that gives them enough space to move around, to get some exercise, to stand up and stretch, but not a lot of extra space. It's adequate but not extra. For your larger rabbits, you want a minimum of 24 inches square. That's 2 feet by 2 feet. And then again, your height can be just 18 inches tall or taller. Your height can be as tall as you want it to be, but a minimum of 18 inches tall. I have not measured my cages. Like I said, they were hand built by someone else that gave them to me when they were finished with them. And I'm not a real good judge of measurement. I will pull out my measuring tape to double check, but I believe these cages are 24 inches tall. Like I said, I'll measure them before the end of the video to confirm that. And then if you have some of the even larger breeds like the Flemish Giant, you're going to want to do cages that are 36 inches square. That would be 36 inches long by 36 inches deep. And I would go with a minimum of 24 inches tall for those for rabbits that are as large as the Flemish Giant. That's just for a single rabbit in a cage. Now for your breeding does, they need at least twice as much space as whatever the measurements are for the size rabbit you have for a single rabbit. So for example, if you have a doe that on her own would require a cage that is 24 inches square, then you are going to want to give her a cage that is no less than 48 inches long. 24 inches deep would be the minimum. I would try to go for 36 if you can, front to back, and like I said, 48 inches long. That way, as her babies grow and begin to come out of the nest box, they will have plenty of room to move around and not be overcrowded. And depending on the size of the litter, when you wean them, you will probably also want to give them a cage that is that size, if you're doing wire cages. The other thing you'll notice in my cages that you may not see in other breeders' cages that have the wire cages is all of my rabbits currently have a wooden box. I use these same boxes for nest boxes, but as I'll show you in this cage right here, I don't put any bedding in there. And I have a few of these boxes that do not even have the wire on the bottom like you typically have in a nest box. The reason that I put these boxes in all of my rabbit cages is it provides them some extra shelter from the wind during the cold weather. As we get into the warmer weather season, you know, late spring, all through the summer, even into the fall, it stays pretty hot here into the fall. I may take these nest boxes out because they are wood. The rabbits do chew on them and I don't want them to be damaged. And they don't need that extra protection from the wind during the hot months. I will still give them a resting board, but not the box during the hot months. But during the cold months, the box acts as a shelter, like I said, so they can get in there to stay warmer during the winter. And then the top of the box is solid, so it gives them a place to sit and rest and get themselves up off the wire. So it doubles as a resting board. And you may be asking, what is a resting board? Well, when you have rabbits on wire cages, you have to worry about sore hocks. As you can imagine, it would not be comfortable to sit on wire all the time. So always, 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 if you have your rabbits in wire bottom cages, always give them something to use as a resting board. It literally, just like this one right here, can be nothing more than a slab of wood. Some other examples of things you might use are ceramic tile. You can actually put those in the freezer, and if you have enough, rotate them out in the summertime so that you're giving your rabbits a nice cold place to lay. It doesn't hurt the tile to go in the freezer. They're easy to clean. You can just wash them off, stick them in your freezer, and take a fresh one out every day or twice a day even, if it's warm enough in your area to need to do it more often than once a day. That's one example. You can buy some plastic nesting boards at places, again, like Tractor Supply or the Tennessee Farmers Co-op or your online farm stores. The plastic resting boards do have slits in them to let urine and feces fall through, and because they're plastic, they are washable, but they give a better support, a better place to lay for your rabbits than to lay right on the wire. Now, some rabbits don't mind to lay right on the wire. A lot of my rabbits, I find, if given the choice, do lay directly on the wire when it's hot, because that wire allows more airflow to help keep their bellies cool. Some of them do like to sit on the resting board more than the wire. I always like to give them the option. Let the rabbit choose what it is they would prefer to do to be most comfortable. So that's your basic setup for rabbits that are living in wire cages. Now let's go talk about my rabbit tractor. So let's talk a little bit about my rabbit tractor. I did not build my cages that are like this, so I unfortunately don't have a demonstration video to show you how to build one of these, but I can show you some of the details and explain how that you can build one for yourself. These cages, just like my chicken tractor that is in the garden currently, you just have four 4-foot long 2x4s, tack them together at the corners like this, either with nails or screws, your choice, and then stretch your wire from one side to the other, and then tack some wire onto each end. I have also wrapped these cages in chicken wire because it helps protect the rabbits from predators like cats, for example, that might want to reach in. But it also keeps small rabbits from being able to get out through these larger wire holes. And then for the door, you just cut a hole in your wire, and a real easy thing to use for your hinges are zip ties. Just put 3 or 4 of these across through here, and they work great as hinges. And then I have trampoline springs that are holding these closed. This lock is because these cages in my front yard, and since I live inside the city, I don't want people walking by to decide to open the cage and pet the rabbits. The lock is not normally necessary, but these are just the springs off of a trampoline, like I said. You could use any kind of a heavy-duty spring or a heavy-duty clip like what goes on the end of a dog leash, for example. And then you'll also see that I have in here a J feeder. That is in the event that I did need to supplement the rabbits in my rabbit tractor with pellets. I have not needed to supplement these guys since I have brought them to the front yard, and they have been here, I know, 2 weeks. I actually think it's been 3 weeks. I'll have to go back and look at the calendar to see, but I believe it's been 3 weeks. They are doing a fine job of eating the grass in my yard. It has been a little over a week since they were on this spot here. That's why you can see that it's growing back. But if you compare this side of my yard where the rabbits have not been to this side of the yard where they have been, they are doing a very good job of trimming the yard down. So that's one advantage to housing your rabbits in a rabbit tractor. Similar to a setup like this is a colony. And a colony is basically any type of rabbit housing situation where you have more than one rabbit that is sharing a cage. So technically, my rabbit tractor here is both a tractor and a colony. And I guess I should clarify, a colony is typically a set of breeding rabbits, usually at least 3 rabbits, 2 does, and a buck. So this could be set up as a colony if these 2 were does and I had a buck in here. Another option that some rabbit breeders will use is a hutch similar to this one. I no longer use hutches because I don't need to. I have my hanging wire cages. But this is a hutch that I used for many, many years. It has doors. They can be wooden or they can be wire, depending on the materials that you have. This is actually set up to be a 2-hole cage, or space for 2 rabbits. As you can see, there's wire on the floor and on the walls. And then the doors just close like this. Open, close. It's a long story why this one has a window. They don't need windows necessarily, or you could put windows, or you could just put wire on the front, depending on how much wire you have access to, how cheaply you want to build this. This whole cage was built, or this whole hutch was built out of a half a sheet of plywood and a couple of 2x4s. And of course some screws. So there's that as an option. And yes, I can confirm that these cages are in fact 24 inches tall. So they are plenty tall enough for any size rabbit that I might want to put in here. So it's windy out here today, and I decided to come back into the rabbit barn to talk to you more about the different types of housing type setups that some people might have. So I showed you all about my wire cages, and then I showed you my rabbit tractor. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about colonies. A colony setup is basically any type of housing situation where you would have at least a trio of rabbits. And a trio is considered to be 2 does and a buck. that are of breeding age. And a colony setup, like I said, would be to have those 3 rabbits living in a group housing, basically, where they're sharing the same home, they're sharing the same feeders, sharing the same waters. A lot of people will set up a colony type situation in maybe a stall in a barn. If you do that, I recommend that you use a stall with either a gravel flooring or concrete. Wood flooring is going to soak up the rabbit urine and stink to high heavens, and you will be sorry that you did it. The same thing may be true of dirt, but you're going to have the problem of your rabbits digging in the dirt. And if you're okay with them digging and digging their burrows to have their nest into the soil, that's okay. Just be aware that your rabbits may try to dig out, and sometimes those tunnels can go for several yards before they come back up again, and a rabbit in a barn with a dirt floor who decides to dig out may be out and gone before you realize that it has even happened. I don't like colony setups for that reason, because of the fact that you still have to have either a concrete floor or a wire floor, or at the very least pretty thick layer of gravel, and then bedding on top of that. If you do concrete or gravel, either one, you want to have some pretty thick bedding. You can use wood shavings, you can use straw or hay. You're going to have to clean that out pretty much constantly. Maybe not every day, especially if you do some deep bedding, but pretty frequently you're going to have to clean that out. And for me personally, that's not something that I want to have to do. I personally feel like it is more sanitary to keep your rabbits in a wire cage so that you don't have to constantly clean bedding all the time. You don't have to worry about smells. Now, that's not to say that wire cages never have to be cleaned. You do have to sometimes take a wire brush and scrub out the corners, because hair will collect in the corners. When they go to the bathroom, that will collect in the corners sometimes. But it's just a periodic thing. It's not something that you have to do every day or even every week, because most of their waste falls through the wire. And then just every once in a while, like I said, if it begins to build up, if it begins to, hair collecting on the bottom of the cage, just take a wire brush and scrub that off. I usually try to do that about once a month. That seems to be sufficient for keeping my cages pretty clean, is just to go through about once a month and clean out the corners. I want to talk just a little bit about the wire that you want to use on a wire cage and show you some of the differences in that. So for your flooring cage, your cage flooring, the best wire that I have found is the 1/2 inch by 1 inch spacing. It's a heavier gauge wire than your typical 1/2 inch hardware cloth, and this will last a lot longer, and it's much easier on your rabbit's feet to be standing on this as opposed to the hardware cloth. You can use this type of wire for the wire on the sides of your cages, but it's a little bit expensive, so if you want to use a cheaper wire for the sides of your cages, it's perfectly okay to do that. You can use the hardware cloth for the sides of your cages if you want to. It will rust through faster from the rabbit urine than your heavier gauge wire. The hardware cloth will, so be careful of that if you use it on the sides, because on your corners, your edges here, is where the rabbits a lot of times will back their butt up against the wire here and pee, and so the urine runs down in your corners like this. So if you have hardware cloth coming up the sides of your cages, then down here on the edges you're going to have a problem with that rusting out eventually. My cages, I cannot even tell you where these wire panels came from. They were actually purchased off of the bed of a truck that was taking them to the scrapyard. I don't know what they were for, but this is 2-inch wire. You can buy 1-inch wire that's pretty cheap. Here's an example of that. Tractor Supply has rolls of this type of wire. It's just 1-inch welded wire, and it works great for the sides of your cages. You can use the 2x4-inch wire like you saw on my rabbit tractor. Just be aware that smaller rabbits can get through that, as can predators. So for the sides of your cages, you can use just about any type of wire that you have on hand, as long as your small rabbits won't be able to escape from it. But for the wire on the bottom of your cages, I would not recommend anything other than the 1/2 inch by 1 inch wire. And then on the cages where I typically house mamas with babies, I like to go back over them again with chicken wire, just because it makes it more difficult for the babies to be able to wiggle through that. They usually cannot get through that unless you're using a smaller wire on the sides of your cages. Like if you did use the hardware cloth, that would be good. The babies can't get through that. Or the 1 inch wire like I just showed you, the babies can't get through that either. But if you're using the 2 inch square or larger, then for babies you want to line it with something smaller, at least part way down. As you can see here, I have not covered the chicken wire all the way to the top. The babies are not going to be able to get above here. I just have it, a good 8-10 inches, something like that is usually sufficient for keeping the babies from getting out. So that is all for today's video. Keep in mind that today's video is just the first in a series of videos that I will be doing on rabbit care. The other topics will be announced as they come up, but if you have any suggestions or any specific questions you would like to ask, please do feel free to leave those in the comments down below. Click the thumbs up button if you like our video, and if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button so that you will not miss any of our upcoming videos.